school. But I didn't read the fine print. The fine print of the scholarship required that I would have to go into disenfranchised communities and speak about domestic violence. I would have to work in a shelter and work with women and men and children who had experienced domestic violence. I would have to man a hotline, a crisis hotline, and help people get to safety. And that scholarship changed my life. You see, I've never experienced domestic violence, but it affects me. And I firmly believe that just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it shouldn't matter to you. And it matters to me. And because of that, I vow to make domestic violence awareness the calling that God has played upon my life. And so I am pleased to be here today. I want to thank the leadership for the Day of Unity for the invitation for me to speak today. As domestic violence specialist with the Newport News Police Department and a civilian working in law enforcement, it has opened my eyes to the major role that police officers play in addressing the issue of domestic violence. When officers respond to domestic-related calls for service, there are many challenges that officers face, and there are also many opportunities. Domestic-related calls for service are one of the most frequent calls that officers respond to, and they are also one of the most dangerous calls, with 30% of line-of-duty deaths stemming from officers responding to domestic-related calls for service. In my position as domestic violence specialist, I get to train officers all the way from the recruit academy to the command staff, reminding them about the cycle of abuse, best practices, and the need for compassionate and trauma-informed engagement, and the barriers that survivors may face, and the resources in the community that can help diminish the impact of domestic violence. While law enforcement are often called first responders because they are typically the first to show up in the midst of a crisis or an emergency situation. But when it comes to the fight against domestic violence, it is truly the community that are the first responders. Yes. The first time an incident occurs, survivors may not call 911, but they will call you, their friends, and their family members. A survivor may not confide in law enforcement, but they will confide in you, their faith-based leader, their coworker, or their neighbor. By the time they reach out to community partners that are gathered here today, the issues that they are experiencing may be at an all-time high. And that is why it is imperative. It is imperative that we all work together, because each of us play a pivotal role in saving lives. Domestic violence organizations cannot do it alone. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office cannot do it alone. Local nonprofit and independent groups cannot do this work alone, and law enforcement sure can't do it all alone. We all have to work together, and we know that we cannot operate in silos. We cannot operate independently when lives are at stake. We just can't focus on what we do in our own independent organizations. We have to collaborate. We have to work together, because I firmly believe that time is of the essence. There's a life that needs to be saved by us working cooperatively together. And so my call to action for you this evening is that before you leave here tonight, go around, find out who your community partners are, find out what they do, send them an email tomorrow and ask them, how can we collaborate? How can we work together? Because each of us has a role to play in addressing domestic violence, because we are all first responders. Thank you very much.